everybody. This is Julia.
And this is Chris, and this is episode number 44 of the Mixology Talk podcast.
Now, if everything goes according to schedule, this podcast should be published right before Easter. And if you're in the USA, you know that Easter means stores are full of bunnies and eggs and chocolate and all
Cadbury eggs.
Oh,
and
yes.
What were those little tiny, like, marshmallow bunny things?
Peeps.
Peeps. Oh my
man.
God, Peeps.
Do love the Peeps. So we thought we would talk about eggs this week because eggs are actually a common cocktail ingredient.
So while it may seem weird to folks who are new to craft cocktails, eggs have been a component in mixed drinks for a very, very, wait for it, very long time.
How long is that?
3 varies. That's pretty long.
How long is a vary?
Roughly about 3.7 decades.
So full of it. So going back, actually, you could almost argue that eggs have been in mixed drinks going all the way back to the Middle Ages because of eggnog.
One of my favorite drinks I make every year.
I know, it's a good one. And actually, there is a Dutch version, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, is called something like advocaat. And apparently it's something that is consumed at Christmas time and at Easter. So I'm staying on topic here. Easter, good.
Right, I like that.
Thank
I like
you.
that. Yeah.
So these are examples of, I don't want to call them cocktails, but mixed drinks that use whole eggs. And that's not as common nowadays. There is something called a flip, which does use a whole egg, but it's fairly uncommon.
Yeah, flips have been around since probably the late 1800s. I know I've read them on Jerry Thomas's book, which was published the last part of the 1800s. And he references them quite a bit. So, you know, they were floating around there for a while. And just if you start to think about kind of the evolution of spirits and, you know, cuisine and all that stuff, it's been around for a very long time. So it's no surprise that eggs have made their appearance in drinks for quite a while.
Quite a long time, definitely. But nowadays, it is much more common just to see the egg white and not as much the yolk. And I was wondering, Chris, do you know why that is?
You know, I think that the egg yolks are just so rich that
they are,
you know, especially if people are kind of focusing on health, probably shouldn't be drinking, first of all. But,
yeah, really.
But, you know, that extra richness, all that extra kind of fat, it adds a lot of weight to a cocktail for sure, which is why we use them that way.
Right, exactly. They're used in heavy, heavy cocktails. And now that I think about it, when you're cooking or baking, if you want to get that sort of fluffy texture out of an egg white, you absolutely must get rid of the yolk. Otherwise, it'll never actually fluff up in the way that you need it. So it kind of makes sense if you're looking for that texture in cocktails that you are going to omit the yolk.
Right. And it just adds that rich kind of dense mouthfeel, and which is good with the right kind of drink.
With the right
sure.
cocktail, exactly. I don't know about you, but I'm not really looking to add a yolk to my Pisco Sour.
Right. So then let's just kind of focus on the egg whites, and it seems like those are much more common in craft cocktails.
Yeah, definitely. Why would you say that people use egg whites in drinks?
I think there's a couple different reasons. First of all, I think they just look freaking cool. You know, you get a nice egg white cocktail, it's shaken, and you see that layer of foam on the top, and it separates it from, you know, the liquid below it. I think it looks absolutely amazing, personally.
I will absolutely give you that. It definitely also changes the texture of the cocktail completely.
Yeah, it definitely does. So it adds a little bit more of a body, adds more texture.
Like a frothiness, a velvetyness, for lack of a better word.
If the Orange Julius, if we all throw back way back in the day.
Orange Julius, oh my gosh.
They had an option for either a whole egg or an egg white in one of their Julius. So I want to say it was an egg white.
This must have been a really long time ago.
It was like in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm dating myself there. But if anybody knows, definitely let us know.
Yeah.
I just can't quite remember what it was.
That just does not sound good.
Yeah,
egg
it
whites
was really
in
popular.
an Orange Julius.
Well, It's
huh.
kind of like a Pisco Sour. You know,
I
they're
could
blending
see
it
that.
up. They have the citrus in there.
Do they have an option to add alcohol?
Oh, man. They probably should have, or else
opportunity.
you'd probably see them a lot more often than
Yeah,
you do
really.
now.
Probably hard to get a liquor license at the mall food court.
Yeah, I would probably think that's impossible. But yeah, it definitely adds this really cool kind of body to a cocktail that is definitely missing if you don't have your egg white.
Yeah,
there.
it's a creaminess, for lack of a better word. It makes definitely makes a difference. And not only that, but it does actually adjust the flavor. This is something that I didn't really realize until Chris pointed it out. And that is that if you were to imagine for example, what's a good example? Like a whiskey
sour?
Like a whiskey sour, because
Right.
those can have eggs or not, or egg whites or not. If you have a whiskey sour without the egg white, and then make the same recipe but add an egg white, you'll find that the acid is much calmer. It's almost been muted by that egg white. And in addition to, of course, the more velvety, almost creamy body, you're also going to notice that it's not quite as spiky or acidic.
Yeah, and I always use the analogy of kind of something with a lot of sharp edges. So if you have a whiskey sour, it's got a lot of little pointy edges, but if you add the egg whites, the protein from it just kind of mutes everything and kind of chips off all those egg whites or the edges and kind of brings it all a little bit more round and rich and kind of mellow everything out. So, which can be one of the concerns when you start to create egg white cocktails, is the fact that it mutes down all that character. So you really have to bump up the character of your drink in order to kind of overcome that blanket, basically, of flavor.
If you have a cocktail that's got sort of just the right amount of flavor and you add an egg white, you might find that it's kind of lacking afterward.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, just something to kind of keep in mind as you may have to adjust your flavor a little bit.
Right, but for the most part, you can kind of trust the recipe on this one. One thing to note is that a lot of recipes actually call for 1 egg white, which is not a very good measure because, I don't know about you, but when I go to the grocery store, there's eggs, there's extra large eggs, there's huge
little
eggs.
Quail eggs.
There's all kinds of
ostrich
choices.
eggs.
Yeah, ostrich egg cocktails, totally. Probably in San Francisco.
I think I saw somebody using duck egg whites.
Duck whites?
Duck whites.
Trust San Francisco to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note that, I don't know, 1 egg white is not a useful measure. So, Chris, what's the amount you normally use? I don't remember.
So usually the way I store it, and this is fairly common behind the bar, is you'll either store them in these little plastic squeeze bottles, or if you go to IHOP and you have that egg or the syrup container that has a little sharp gate on it.
Oh, yeah, it kind of cuts off the flow.
Right, exactly, because it can be a little bit stringy and kind of grab onto other proteins and stuff and just pull it out. So the little syrup containers with a metal gate are absolutely fantastic for keeping egg whites in there. And so typically I usually use around 0.75 ounces to about a full ounce of egg whites in a cocktail. And more than that, just kind of really brings on an egg taste.
Oh, I can see that. Is that less than an egg typically?
Typically, it's a little bit less, and depending on the size, obviously.
So you may want to measure your egg white before you just toss it in the cocktail, just to make sure it's not way more than an ounce.
Yeah, it seems like mediums and larges, I'm just absolutely guessing on this, but they seem to be about the right amount. So if you have a medium egg, the whites should be about right for that.
And that is, of course, a chicken egg.
Right, exactly.
Not a medium ostrich egg.
Oh my God, it's so gross.
This thing tastes like scrambled eggs.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that would be so disgusting.
That would be gross.
Sorry, listeners.
So, speaking of disgusting, I am apparently not allowed to eat cookie dough because it has raw eggs in it, right? That's what everybody says.
That's what everybody says, but it's so delicious.
I totally still do, but you didn't hear me say that.
Right.
But so if I'm not allowed to eat cookie dough because it has raw eggs in it, why is it okay to have raw eggs in cocktails?
This is kind of a thing of debate, and I think we've kind of collectively landed on one pretty good thought behind this. But in the past, the theory is that the alcohol and the citrus juice helps to kind of cure the egg, basically, like ceviche with raw food, you know, with lemon and raw fish and stuff like that. So it basically kind of cooks it.
Cook is relative.
Right, but the idea is that the longer it sits in alcohol and lemon juice, the less likely the bacteria is going to be there. But the idea of a cocktail is to drink it quickly, so that way...
At the end of the day, there's definitely still a risk, and you should know that if you're going to have a cocktail with raw egg in it. But I think the bartenders typically do try to solve this problem using a couple of different methods to handle these egg whites safely.
Yeah, so the first thing is to use really fresh eggs. As fresh as you can get them is always the best, and use them quickly. You know, don't store them for, you know, a couple of days in a fridge. You know, refresh them every shift, ideally, would be great. And I know I think it was Scott Beatty who put out a book quite a few years ago. He recommended doing it in a very, I guess that's 7.4 decades.
That's a lot of berries.
Light amount of bleach solution. So I think it was like hundreds and hundreds to one, so hundreds of portions of water.
You usually do like a full sink and then a couple drops, right?
Couple drops. And
full sink of water, couple drops of bleach.
Yeah, and just, you know, hold the eggs in there for like 10 seconds. I don't know if there's a lot of benefit to it, but theoretically all the bacteria is on the outside of the egg that can be harmful.
Right. So if you clear off the outside of the egg, that is definitely part of the solution. And that makes a lot of sense. I think
Right.
a lot of people don't take as much care with eggs when they are still egg shaped.
Right.
And so it makes sense you're going to want to make sure that that they are very clean.
Yeah, and the other thing is, just like anything that's perishable or anything that can harm you, especially with raw ingredients, is you want to keep them cold until you're using them. The warmer you get them up, I mean, not to get too nerdy and geeky, because this whole thing, I've done a lot of research
Warning.
on this. I know. This
Nerd
could be an
coming.
hour long.
Nope.
Horrible, boring podcast
Don't
about
worry,
egg
folks.
whites.
That's
Even
what I'm
more
here
so than
for.
it is now. And that's saying something.
And getting back to the topic at hand,
But the idea is you want to keep it more mellow, keep the temperature down a lot more
keep them in the fridge, right?
until you're ready to use them. Yeah,
At the bar, you keep your little syrup dispenser in the fridge, I assume.
Right, or in one of my little stations covered in ice.
Oh, that
and
makes sense.
basically just get the temperature down as
You
low
wouldn't
as
just
possible.
leave them sitting
on
your counter.
Yeah, and if you do, don't order an egg white
Yeah,
cocktail.
if you see egg whites just sort of sitting on the counter, probably don't get
Get the beer.
Yeah, get a beer.
In a bottle, preferably. Yeah, so not surprisingly, the biggest risk is for people with compromised immune systems, but it's really your call. If you're nervous about raw eggs, then you have a couple options.
So your first option is just to skip the egg white cocktails. You can do that. Nobody's going to judge you. I might, just a tiny bit, because you're totally missing out. But you can do that, and that's okay. I don't know about most states, but in the state of California, if a restaurant is serving something with undercooked eggs or undercooked meats, they actually have to mention it on the menu. So typically you will know. I don't know if that's the case in every state, though, so you may want to verify. If you get the heebie-jeebies about raw eggs, it's cool. I get it.
Yeah, one of the other things we've done in the past is, because this is such a touchy subject and people kind of fall on one side of the fence or the other, we actually did an experiment using powdered egg whites that turned out really good. And you don't have to have those same kind of bacterial concerns. So, yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Definitely. I gotta say, I was really surprised by this one, because you open up the can, it looks almost like baking powder. It doesn't look like anything that would actually froth up a cocktail. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm really surprised at how well they worked out. I really kind of wanted to frown upon it and say, this is horrible, and you can totally tell the difference.
You wanted to be hipster about it, didn't you?
I totally did, yeah. But it actually turned out really well. And for anybody that is concerned, even the slightest amount with, contamination and bacteria, this is a great option for you.
Well, and you made, I don't remember, was it a margarita or was it a lemon drop?
I think it was just a traditional whiskey sour, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you made them side by side, and Chris actually gave them to me to taste and asked me which one was the powdered egg whites. And not only could I not tell which was the powdered egg whites, I couldn't tell any difference at all.
Yeah,
they
it
were
still
almost
frosted up, and I think that's the biggest thing, is it didn't have quite the same density on the foam on the top, but
it was still there.
was
I would
still there.
never have complained. It was a
Right.
fantastic cocktail.
Yeah.
And this is a really good option for folks at home, and here's why. Like we mentioned earlier, you need really fresh eggs to do it safely. And I don't know about you, but I don't buy eggs every day. Restaurants may, but I don't.
yeah,
and so
and powdered egg whites aren't cheap. They're definitely more on the expensive side.
they're actually not that bad. I ran an analysis just a
Of
couple of
course
minutes
you
ago because there's math involved, and I love math.
I know. There's a spreadsheet around this, I
There
guarantee
totally
you.
is. So I went on Amazon and I looked up some powdered egg whites, and they were about 21 cents an egg. And then I just did an estimate based on what we see in the grocery store here in California, and they're about 33 cents an egg.
Interesting.
So it's actually cheaper to get the powdered egg whites. So
You hear that, everybody?
I know. It surprised me because they felt expensive, but I think the reason is because you look at the can, depending on the size, it feels expensive for how big the can is, but that can actually replaces a lot of eggs.
And I will say that in California, it seems like our eggs are crazy expensive these days.
They have gotten expensive. So it might definitely be different for folks in other states. And hey, maybe some folks have their own chickens, in which case, go to town. You've got the freshest of them all. Definitely wash those,
Yeah,
for
definitely.
the record.
So before we wrap this up, let's very quickly talk about how you actually use egg whites in cocktails, because there's a bit of a technique to it.
Yeah, because I know there's something that you do that's a little bit different from just a normal cocktail, right, Chris?
Yeah, so with any egg white cocktail, I recommend doing a dry shake to it.
A dry shake.
Dry shake. So you incorporate all your ingredients, you add your egg whites, and then you shake it without ice. And
So it's not dry at all. Maybe it's like a warm shake.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the idea here is that the water will dilute it, and the colder it gets, the less likely the foam's going to kind of build up, and the less dense the foam will be when you actually pour it out.
Oh, so you're almost whipping your egg whites in like a warmer environment to try to get it to froth up more.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so you do the dry shake, which is actually a warm shake because it's just a normal shake without ice.
Right.
In the cocktail shaker,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Okay. And then you do that for the same amount of time you would normally shake
about
a cocktail?
5-10 seconds. Yeah, to
Okay.
get the air really incorporated in there. Then you open up the cocktail tin, whatever you're using, Boston shaker, cobbler shaker. Then you add your ice and shake normally, like you would.
Again.
5-10 seconds.
Okay.
And then, yeah, you strain out your cocktail. Now, with this one, I definitely recommend a fine strainer because some of the time the egg itself will become a little bit on the kind of that chalkiness side.
Egg bits.
Yeah, you have some egg bits floating in your cocktail.
That's a technical term, by the way.
It is.
No, it's not.
Look it up. All right.
Maybe Urban Dictionary. I don't know.
Right, yeah. So the fine strainer will definitely catch some of those little tiny egg bits
Egg bits.
from floating in your cocktail. Nobody likes that.
Nobody likes the egg bits. So you go ahead and you fine strain your cocktail into your glass. There is one last step that I think is important, and it's not something I'd ever thought of, but once again, Chris recommended it. And that is that if you're using egg whites in a cocktail, make sure you spritz the cocktail with something, whether it be citrus or bitters or something. If you do that, it'll give a nice aroma that sort of covers up any risk of egg smell, which it's usually not too bad, but if the customer is like me and takes forever to drink their cocktail, it may warm up a little bit, and then you can really start to smell it. It's not good.
It smells a little bit like a slight
Sulfur.
hint of sulfur to it.
Yeah.
And it's completely edible. It's not going to harm you or anything like that, but it's just a little bit off-putting. So what I usually do is just put a little fresh citrus oil from like an orange or a lemon, whatever I use in the
Whatever's
cocktail,
in the cocktail.
and just put it right over the top of the drink and just kind of, we call it express the oil.
That is so hipster.
I know.
I say spritz because it's actually a verb.
Spritz. I like spritzing it.
But I think it's important, though, because we like to pretend it's all about taste, but it really is about aroma, too. And if you're starting to smell sulfur, I don't know about you, but I'm probably not going to finish my drink.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not good. That's about it for today. Hopefully you'll take the chance and give some egg whites a try in your next cocktail, but, safely, of course.
Yeah, so head on over to the show notes for all of your safety tips and some links to powdered egg whites if that's what you're into.
I'm into that sort of thing.
Yep,
Not
absolutely.
gonna lie. So the show notes are the usual, mixologytalk.com/44, and that's it for this week.
Cheers, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.